right, well, today's sermon will be provided by yours truly. I am the student pastor here at the Christabelle Spiritualist Church. My name is Mark Dorset. Now, I know quite a few of you have gotten familiar with my usual sermon style, how that I normally will approach things. I'm trying something a little different today, so I ask, afterwards, if you give me your opinion on which style you like a little better. I'm trying something a little more formal, a little more pastorly for me. So let me know what you think. On this day, let us begin by giving honor to the 5 pioneers of Washington, D.C. who followed Spirit's call. Henry Steinberg, O.W. Humphrey, Theodore J. Mayer, Major Robert Demick, and Milan C. Edison. As directed, they formed a plan. They began by sending out subscriptions calling for the organization of modern spiritualism by forming an umbrella organization for all spiritualists of America. From that humble beginning, the National Spiritualist Association, otherwise known as the NSA, was formed in Chicago, Illinois in September of 1893. So after that, when did the original National Spiritualist Association change its name to the National Spiritualist Association of Churches? That happened in 1953, so it took quite a while for that change to occur. Now, once again, following Spirit's call for a headquarters that was located in sight of the nation's capital, Theodore J. Mayer donated 3 buildings at 600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. for the purpose of a general office of the NSA. In 1946, those buildings were sold, and the office was moved to Chicago, Illinois, and then to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then next, in 1970, it was moved to Casadega, Florida. And then finally, in 1990, it was relocated to the grounds of the Lilydale Assembly in Western New York. I'm sure a few of you spiritualists out there have heard of that place. In the early days, state associations were formed, and this enhanced the growth of the organization. It was not long thereafter that New England became spiritualism's stronghold, slowly moving westward and finally reaching California primarily by the effort of Elizabeth Harlow Getz. She became known as the one-man band as she traveled throughout the United States, predominantly in a horse-drawn carriage. Those early days were difficult in so many ways, but the brunt of negativity, it fell upon the mediums. Many were charged with fraud, faced with judgment, and sentenced to prison or insane asylums. It was Harrison D. Barrett and Mary, otherwise known as Mercy Cadwallader, who formed the Mediums Educational and Defense Fund and stood before many a judge in the defense of honest mediums. Early on, the organization recognized that they needed guidelines as well as defining factors for spiritualism. There were many suggestions put forth over the years to define exactly what constituted the definition of these guidelines should be. And, they took a little bit of time, but they did eventually come up with a few different guidelines and a few different things throughout various conventions. In 1899, the Declaration of Principles 1 through 6, so you had 1 through 6 came into effect starting in 1899. In 1909, Declarations 7 and 8 were added. In 1914, they added the definition of a spiritualist. A spiritualist is one who believes as part of his or her religion in communication between this and the spirit world by means of mediumship, and who endeavors to mold his or her character and conduct in accordance with the highest teachings derived from such communication. In 1914, they added the definition of a medium. A medium is one whose organism is sensitive to vibrations from the spirit world and through whose instrumentality intelligences in that world are able to convey messages and produce the phenomenon of spiritualism. In 1919, then they added the definition of spiritualism as a science, philosophy, and religion, which I know that you have heard me speak about before. In 1930, they added the definition of a healer. 1944, they added Declaration of Principles number 9. In 1952, they added the definition of phenomena of spiritualism. And through all of these, spiritualism was now well on its way to providing an understanding of its foundational basis. It is recorded that by the turn of the century, and by that I mean the turn of the 19th into 20th centuries, Spiritualism recorded 11 million members. I love the idea of having 11 million spiritualists, and I know that we can do that again. It recorded that home circles flourished, that in its expansion in 1911, they published the first Spiritualist manual, which actually I have down here. Oop, that's not it. But anyway, they also, in 1919, they published the National Spiritualist Summit, which I know quite a few of you have probably heard of. It's actually the publication for spiritualists that has existed and been continuously published since 1919, which I think is pretty cool that it's been in published that long. The first correspondence course that they did was authored by Thomas Grimshaw and Mark Barwise and was released in the late 1930s as the General Course of Modern Spiritualism. In 1940, an advanced course in the history, science, philosophy, and religion of modern spiritualism was co-authored by Paul LeVote and Marilyn J. Autry. However, by the beginning of the 20th century, spiritualism started to wane. And then after World War I, which was fought from 1914 to 1918, it brought many bereaved people who sought out mediums in order to communicate with loved ones that had made the ultimate sacrifice. Now, spiritualism was once more again on the move after World War I. Wise advice previously given: to know where you are going, you must know where you have been. And the dawning of the 21st century called for facing the reality of where spiritualism had been and where it was going. It's opened its doors to humanity, creating an interest in their own intuitive nature. And some people sought classes, some people sought workshops and studies. And likewise, spiritualism's direction pointed to advanced education of mediums, healers, teachers, all people in preparation for the ministry. Many home circles became exciting again, became interesting to people. NSAC's purpose is to create a firm foundation for establishing spiritualism in the heart and mind of the individual. Churches and other spiritualist societies offer classes, workshops, and seminars. We today owe a great debt of gratitude to these pioneers of the science, philosophy, and religion of spiritualism who I have referred to today. It is through their hard work and sacrifices that we are able to be here today in this chapel, on these grounds, and surrounded by loving spirit energy. Thank you to all who have come before us. It is through your efforts that we have the amazing and strong foundation with which we can now stand strong and stand tall, much like the sunflower that is the spiritualist symbol. Spiritualism is on the move. It flags wave freely around the nation. An early motto of the Spiritualist Church is echoed from every church platform. Spiritualism can meet the goals set by our pioneers so many years ago. Spiritualism, the light of the world. As the sunflower turns its face to the light of the sun, so spiritualism turns the face of humanity to the light of truth. Amen. Thank you, everybody.